Hey everybody. So I'd like to talk a little bit about intervals. I see a whole lot of information on the web for the electric guitar on scales and tricks and licks and such, but I rarely see an in-depth discussion of intervals, which to me they're kind of the bare essential elements that make up all music, really. Other than just a single note, it's music, and especially the guitar, it's about the relationship between notes. And once you really get a great feel for how these relationships work and what notes are drawn to others or are uh, pulled away from others, then all of a sudden scales and the differences among scales and modes and things like that becomes a whole lot clearer. So I'm going to start with that. The first interval is really a unique interval, and it's not something that's going to take a lot of time, but it would be the unison. So what a unison is basically the same note played together at the same frequency. Usually you'll find that among different instruments. A guitar player is going to play a single note, and a vocalist or a keyboard player or another guitar player will play the same note. A lot of times you'll find this in unison lines, where lead solos are doubling each other, that sort of thing. Or you find octaves a lot, which we'll get into later, but the unison is really sort of the basic beginning point. And it's not associated with a particular number as a lot of these intervals will, and I'll explain that later. But really, the unison, as much as people might dismiss looking into it, is really used quite often. You're going to find it when you first learn how to tune a guitar. Generally, the first type of tuning method is where you're playing at the 5th fret on, let's say, this low E string, the 6th string, and you're matching it with the next string higher, the 5th string. And in a standard tuning situation, they should sound identical. Again, in a standard tuning situation, my guitar right now is not tuned to a standard 440 or even like an E flat. I have it just sort of randomly tuned right now, but it's tuned to itself. But at any rate, you're going to find that with your your 5th fret, where you've got the 5th fret on the A string should sound identical to the 4th string D. Same with the next set of strings. And then obviously people know that the B note on the G string, 4th fret, should sound identical to the next 2nd string, B, and back up to the 5th fret, 5th fret of the B string to the open E string. Should sound identical. So unisons are going to play a part in your tuning. You'll recognize them for that. But also you'll see it in just standard blues phrasing, where you've got where you got the 5th fret on the B string and the open E string, where you'll hear kind of the blues phrasings where it'll start with a unison, where that doubling of the note kind of strengthens the character of that note. And you'll find, not in with Ben so much, but you'll find older rock and roll and older blues players, where, or even like jazz blues, where players did the standard sort of kind of lick, but instead of that, the strings generally were a lot heavier, and so they would do a slide up and then play that kind of lick, which is even, I think, cool and different for a modern player to try or attempt. So you'll find unisons like that. You'll find it in the traditional sort of double stop or unison bends. That's real common, where you have, let's say, this 5th fret B string and the 7th fret G string, which is down a whole step, and you play them together, and you bend that D note on the G string, 7th fret, up 2, and so you get this sort of crazy harmonic situation where they cross paths until you get up to that note. You hear that in a lot of modern rock type situations, or even on the top string, where you have that kind of thing, where you'll have usually a 3 fret spread, where your 3rd or 4th finger will get under, let's say, this 8th fret B string and this 5th fret E string, and bend the B string until it reaches that unison note. Anyway, those are just some random examples. I just wanted to introduce intervals by talking first about unisons, because I thought, why even talk about that? But then once I started really looking into it, I found it was actually pretty interesting to go into, and there are actually some useful practical applications for the unison interval. So next time we'll get into the next interval, the half step.